Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for day 2 of Crime Writers Week. I am Michelle Adams from ProWritingAid. If you can see and hear me, please drop your name and location in the chat, as so many of you are already doing. You know the drill. I have dropped some links for you there. We do have an exclusive offer right now to upgrade to ProWritingAid Premium, and you can see the link to access that. And you can also see the link to access our exclusive Crime Writers Facebook group and the Crime Writers Week Hub, which contains all of the event schedules for the week, as well as the recordings, and any available slides from our amazing speakers are there for download as well. So make sure you check those out. And we also have some really cool links from Abbott, our speaker today. So make sure you check out her social media accounts and also her work. And we're going to hear from her in just a moment. But first, I do have a couple of housekeeping items to go over with you. So first off, if you have a question for our speaker today, please use the Q&A box. That will help us keep track of your questions. We will have a good amount of time today for Q&A, so make sure you get those questions in as she is speaking. If you drop them in the chat, there's a good chance we will lose them, since, as you can see, the chat moves very quickly. So if you're using the chat, though, to connect with other participants, which we encourage you to do, just make sure you select everyone from the drop-down menu near the chat box so that everybody can see your messages. Otherwise, they just come to me and our speaker. As a reminder, our sessions, as yesterday were, today are free, tomorrow are free as well for everyone to attend, but Thursdays are for ProWritingAid Premium subscribers only. So if you're wondering if you have a premium account, if you have a monthly, annual, or lifetime ProWritingAid license, that makes you premium. So you will have access to Thursday's events. If you do not have access to Thursday's events, we do have an exclusive 30% upgrade offer happening for all of our participants this week. And you can find the link for that in the chat box. I'll drop it intermittently throughout the session today. We encourage you to upgrade if you can. It enables you to take advantage of all the awesome ProWritingAid Premium features, as well as helps us to continue to put on events like these for you, which we really enjoy doing. So if you have any questions about going premium, or any questions about your account, please email hello@prowritingaid.com and we'll be happy to chat with you about that. And with that taken care of, we can go ahead and begin. So hello again, everyone. I am Michelle from ProWritingAid, and today I am joined by A.A. Abbott. British crime thriller writer A.A. Abbott, also known as Helen, loves to escape with an exciting and emotional read, and that's what she aims to write to. Based in Bristol, England, she's also lived and worked in London and Birmingham. All three cities feature in her fast-paced suspense thrillers. Her next book, Lies at Her Door, features themes of buried memories, gaslighting, and family secrets, and it will be published very soon on July 5th, so that's very exciting. We're so happy to have her here today. So Helen, if you are ready to join us, I will go ahead and disappear and you can just take over and we'll be back for Q&A.
Thank you, Michelle. Hello, everybody. I'm so excited to be here for ProWritingAid's Crime Writers Week. I absolutely love ProWritingAid. It's made a big difference to my writing. And I also love working with beta readers, and that's what I'm going to talk about today. First, let me just share my screen. I have a presentation for you. Okay, can you all see that? Grand. Then we'll get started. Polishing your book with beta readers. This is what we're going to cover today. First of all, why you should use beta readers. Secondly, how and when to work with them. And thirdly, where to find them. First, just a little bit about me. As Michelle said, I'm a British thriller writer. I'm the author of 9 books, including the forthcoming release, lies at her door. And I'm a member of the Alliance of Independent Authors, an international authors organisation, and various writing and author clubs in the UK where I live. As I said, I'm a big fan of ProWritingAid. I've got a subscription which I use frequently. And I'm also a big fan of beta readers. I work with at least 20 beta readers per book. That is quite a lot. And it is at the high end, but the vast majority of writers work with at least some beta readers. And I'll explain to you why and what advantages that brings. First of all, you might ask, what is a beta reader? What am I talking about? Well, I see a beta reader as being a beta tester for my books. Some people use the term to mean the same as an ARC reader. That's an advanced review copy reader who will get a book just before publication and they will then post their reviews so that there's a bit of a buzz around the book when it comes out into the world. And sometimes people will ask ARC readers to review for typos as well. I try very hard to get all my beta reading and editing and proofreading out of the way well in advance of publication so that the ARC readers get a good copy. But inevitably some typos do creep through, and I'm always very grateful to people who point them out. What a beta reader isn't is an editor or a proofreader. I recommend that everybody uses an editor and a proofreader as well. There is a reason why traditional publishers use editors and proofreaders 100% of the time. It is to make sure a book is as good as it possibly can be, and it's giving the reader an absolutely fantastic experience. That said, if you're using an editor and a proofreader, why would you use beta readers too? Well, a fresh pair of eyes on a book is always a good thing. And in my opinion, the more fresh pairs of eyes, the better. Also, you might use a beta reader for their specialist knowledge. One of my beta readers recently retired as a superintendent, a detective superintendent in the local Avon and Somerset police who cover the Bristol area where I live. And she is an absolutely invaluable person to look through my manuscript and spot my mistakes in police procedure. And last but not least, personally, certainly, I find beta readers are useful for reducing my editing costs by making sure that my manuscript is as clean as it possibly can be, that my plots, characters, and structure are as good as they can be before the editor sees them. I'm giving my editor a cleaner manuscript, I'm giving her less work, and therefore she charges me less. Not all editors work on the basis of time spent, but the vast majority of them do. So you can reduce your editing costs by giving your editor a manuscript where most of the problems have already been fixed. However, don't just take my word for it. I surveyed other writers, mostly members of the Alliance of Independent Authors, and I got 23 responses back, of whom over 80% used beta readers. And I'll tell you a bit more about why they use them and how they use them. But let me just mention that 4 people, that's less than 20% of the sample, did not use beta readers. And here's why. They felt that an editor was sufficient for their needs, and that using a beta reader or beta readers took too long. And I totally accept that that is their experience, and that it is perfectly okay for them not to use beta readers, but the reason why I do is because I find, even though my editor is absolutely brilliant and sparkles fairy dust all over my manuscript, my beta readers come up with so many great ideas, and they in fact do spot things that the editor does not, that I would never ever consider using an editor alone. And although it does prolong my writing process to ask for feedback and receive it from multiple beta readers, it is possible to cut down on that time by having fewer beta readers, and also by giving them a deadline and sticking to it. So if you're a bit worried that using beta readers will mean it takes so long to get your book out that you will miss deadlines, then worry no further. Just prioritize quality over quantity, use a few beta readers, agree a deadline with them, and you should be able to meet any publication deadlines that you have. Anyhow, moving on to why people do use beta readers. The survey responses quoted a variety of reasons, and I've highlighted here in bold the two most important ones, the ones that cropped up again and again. They were to improve story structure and to improve flow and readability of the story. In addition to that, people mentioned finding typos, improving characterization, improving dialogue, for specialist knowledge. I've mentioned earlier that I work with an ex-detective superintendent of the British Police, and I work with a great variety of specialists and have done in the past also. Other respondents mentioned picking up inconsistencies and picking up plot holes. And I have to admit, I'm very much guilty of that myself. In the book I'm about to publish, Lies at Her Door, I actually had a situation in the draft where somebody has their throat cut, and a well-meaning bystander, in my view, thought it would be a good idea to apply pressure to the neck to staunch the flow of blood. Unfortunately, various beta readers with far more first aid knowledge than me pointed out that the effect of that would be to kill the individual by cutting off the flow of air through their airways. So I consulted a nurse and found a different way of dealing with that particular chapter. But I have to say, I was extremely grateful for the multiple beta readers who pointed out the problem in my fantastic idea. Then moving back to what the survey respondents said, one of them explained that they did all of these things. They used beta readers for all of the above, and they were also careful of the order in which they used them. And they said there is no point addressing typos in a section that later gets cut. So you may, once you know your beta reader's strengths, give the people who are good on story structure an early version of your story. And then as the draft progresses, you might run it past beta readers who are good at improving character and dialogue, and finally give the nearly final version to the people who are good at spotting typos. And last but not least, one of the respondents said that they used beta readers to reassure themselves that the book was of a publishable standard, which is obviously an absolutely fantastic reason for getting a fresh pair of eyes on a book. Now, the million-dollar question: do you pay your beta readers? Well, I would say the golden rule is no, don't pay them. But there are exceptions. Some of my survey respondents pay in kind with a book or a beta reader swap. And I do that myself. If somebody has beta read for me, I will always beta read for them. And I do like to offer my beta readers a copy of the final book. If they're in the UK, as I am, I'll send them a signed paperback if they like, and otherwise I'll give people an ebook. Of course, you can choose to pay beta readers, and you don't have to insist that their services are given to you for free, although the vast majority of beta readers will read for free. But if you want to, you can pay cash. You may have a friend who you'd like to help out financially, so you could offer them money in exchange for beta reading, and that ensures that they keep their dignity and they don't feel they're getting a handout from you. Or you could use a commercial service like Books Go Social, who among their other services do offer beta reading, which I believe is for a fixed price. I should caution that if you do pay anybody for beta reading, do agree the fee in advance so you don't get any nasty surprises. Apologies if I was being Captain Obvious in saying that. Let's move on to another question. How many beta readers is the right number? Well, how long is a piece of string? I work with 20 to 30 beta readers, but the survey respondents don't. The vast majority, nearly 60%, work with between 2 and 5 beta readers. Others may have more, others may have fewer. So don't feel that you need 20 to 30 beta readers like me, but I hope the message that you'll take away from this session is that it's a good idea to have some beta readers working with you and helping you polish your manuscript. Now, when should you use them? Well, your mileage may vary. In my humble opinion, it's best at the pre-edit stage. And as I've explained, that cuts down on my editing costs. But some writers will work with beta readers post-edit, and others will wait until the post-proofread stage and they'll get their ARC readers to spot typos, but otherwise they won't be asking for any comments on the manuscript from beta readers. This is what the survey respondents said. So most people worked with beta readers before the editor got to see the manuscript. Some did so afterwards, some did both, and some used ARC readers post-proofread, and 2 people said that they didn't use an editor, which rather struck fear into my heart, and because I'm a firm believer in the benefits of using an editor in the professional polish that an editor can provide. And one of the survey respondents, who was an editor as well, also mentioned this, and in a plea for editors to be used, said that some authors would say that their beta readers didn't complain about things that they, the editor, had found. But in the editor's opinion, those edits made the book that much better, and beta readers shouldn't replace editors. And I totally agree with that sentiment. I think both are needed to produce a polished and rounded book. As you can see, another survey respondent said that they gave their beta readers a short questionnaire to let them know the sort of issues that they wish to address. And I think that's useful for keeping beta readers focused, and I do that too. And before we go through the kind of questions that I ask, let's just move back to what we're using beta readers for, to improve story structure, flow, readability, and to find typos, improve the characterization, etc., etc., etc. You obviously need to decide what you want, where you need help, where you think that there may be weaknesses that you want fixed. But at the end of the day, it's those things, it's what you want from your beta readers that will determine the kind of questions you ask them. And a questionnaire is very, very helpful. So this is the way that I work with my beta readers. I do it at the pre-edit stage, as I've mentioned, and I say to them, please give me the feedback in any format you like. But here's a questionnaire in case you find it useful. And mostly they do find it useful. I certainly find it useful to focus the kind of information that I get back. Mostly they find it useful to give them some structure and to know what I want. Some of them don't use the questionnaire. Some of them mark up the manuscript. Quite a few mark up the manuscript and they fill in the questionnaire as well. Others prefer to give feedback in the format of a telephone call or a discussion over coffee. Or one of my beta readers likes to go out for lunch with wine, which I pay for. I'm happy to do that because they're doing me a favor, and I very much like a convivial lunch with wine as well. But whether wine or not is involved, I set a deadline because otherwise I could be waiting a long time. And I don't like to delay publication too much because I want to give myself enough time to look at all the feedback from everybody in the round. Now I'm going to go through very quickly the 20 questions or so that I give my beta readers, and I'll just explain why I ask them these things, although again, I risk being Captain Obvious because it may well be self-evident to you. First of all, I ask whether they read an electronic copy or a paperback book. I do get a few paperbacks printed up for beta readers who like them. It's not too expensive, and it means that I do get some beta readers who I think are particularly good to give me feedback when they probably wouldn't if they gave them an electronic copy. They are people who very much prefer a paperback book, and they're doing me a favor, so I'm happy to give them the format that they want. Then I ask them what genres they typically read and whether my book is a genre that they would typically read. And that's really important too, because I think the best beta readers are those who understand your genre really well. And that means people who like to read it. I'm not saying the others aren't helpful, they are. But I will probably give more weight to the opinion of people who know the genre. And then I'll also ask them what genre they think the book is, because I want to know whether I'm off beam or not. Moving on, I then ask about things like whether there's anything in the first paragraph, the first page, or any other page that jars, that makes them not want to read on, because I'm interested in giving a very smooth flowing reading experience. So if there's something that stops that happening, I want to know about it. Similarly, was the pace of the story about right? Was it too fast or too slow? I'm interested in their opinions, and I want to know if it flowed. Then this is the questionnaire for my last book, Lies at Her Door. So obviously some of the questions are specific to that book and you wouldn't use them, but I hope it gives you an idea of the kind of things you can ask and why you should. So I ask whether the main character was sympathetic, because I think it's important to me that there's somebody in the book that the reader loves and identifies with. And then I ask if there's anybody or any place that should have got more airtime. Question 12 is a really important one. It's asking for specialist knowledge. Obviously, my ex-police detective came back with some very helpful feedback this time round, but I also got some helpful feedback from people who knew about other aspects of characters in the book. And just as an aside, you would be amazed what people know about. When I ask people to read my book, I don't necessarily know that they know about the music industry or eating disorders, or in previous books, whether they know about Clubland or DJing or prison visiting or anything like that. But beta readers are generally very, very generous with the knowledge that they have. And you would be surprised if you asked a random selection of people about exactly what they do know. So always be prepared to ask for a bit more specific knowledge, specific information. I do apologise. I've just advanced the slides, so I'll bring them back again. As I say, if you feel that there's an area where you feel you need to know more, just ask the beta readers about it, and you may be surprised by what they know. Then moving on, I asked them if there were any words or language that they didn't like. And what was especially helpful here is that I'm based in the UK and I write in British English, but I do have some US beta readers, and they very kindly explained where there were some words I'd used which were very, very British words, brand names like tannoy, which just may not occur in countries like the US, and I was then able to rewrite and take them out of the book. I also asked whether the characters and places appeared credible, whether they behaved in an age-appropriate way. Those are the kind of questions where I'm just looking for suggestions to whether I can do things better. Then I asked whether the ending was satisfactory and whether the book felt long enough, and most people said that it needed an extra chapter or two, so I put that in. And I asked whether there was anything they liked or didn't like. Now, when I first wrote a draft and sent it out to beta readers, I was incredibly nervous about asking them about the things that they did or didn't like. And I was so relieved when people came back and said they absolutely loved the book. It was absolutely perfect. Because at that stage, as a nervous and new writer, I very much needed my ego stroked. But at the same time, the feedback that was really, really, really useful was the feedback about things that people didn't like. And these days, if somebody tells me they really loved my book and there's nothing wrong with it, I probably wouldn't ask them to beta read again, because I'm interested in the things that are going wrong. I want to know mostly what went wrong, although it is useful to know what went right as well. Then after another couple of questions, I asked if they had any other comments, and that's where mostly they gave me both barrels. But as I said, it's really, really, really useful to know what's going wrong. However, how you choose to use the beta reader feedback is entirely up to you. Remember, what you're getting is somebody's opinion, so you choose how to react. You can totally ignore it if you want to. If the majority are saying the same thing, it is a good idea not to ignore it and to rewrite. But ultimately, it is your call. It's your book and your decision. And if only one person comes up with a fantastic idea that you really, really love, then use it. Don't be shy. Take that idea and run with it. But ultimately, whatever they say, don't get angry. And if you really, really disagree, then it's totally okay to ignore the feedback and move on. Now, I'll just say a little bit about where you can find these wonderful people who can help you make your book great. When I started, my first port of call was the writing group I belonged to. And then I would ask pretty much anybody, family, friends, colleagues. If anyone knew that I was writing a book and expressed an interest in it, I would ask them whether they would read it. And that's because I was interested in how readers were experiencing the book, not necessarily in how fellow writers were experiencing it. And I think it's actually good to get a blend of readers and writers and specialists like my ex-police contact and the philosopher and nurses who read my most recent draft. I think it's good to have a blend of people reading it, because then you'll get a variety of opinions and it'll all be really valid feedback and really useful. So if you're short of beta readers and you really need them, pull in people from the street. But in case you'd rather not do that, here are some ideas from my survey respondents. You could ask your writing group, family and friends, as I did. You can put it out to your network using word of mouth. So if you need to find a policeman to look at your book, just ask around, because even though your friends might not be policemen, they may have other friends who are. You could ask your newsletter subscribers. You could search out expertise by, for example, phoning up the local police station and asking if they will help. I know of other writers who have had a great deal of success doing that. Most police are very, very willing to help out. And other survey respondents have used bloggers. And you could also consider social media like Facebook groups and LinkedIn. So that's a very, very swift summary of why we should use beta readers, how and when to work with them, and where to find them. So I think I've said enough in this presentation. Over to you for your questions, which I'd be very happy to hear about and to answer.
That was great, Helen. Thank you so much. Just so you're aware, Zoom is having some issues, but we were able to get in and start the session before it kicked us out. So we have a lot of viewers watching in our Facebook group during the live stream right now as well. So for everyone watching on Facebook or on Zoom, we will be still able to post the replay as long as Zoom lets us access the recording today. And Helen has offered so generously to share her slides with us. So those will also be posted on the hub. So we do have time for Q&A. We have about 21 questions open at the moment. If you have a question, make sure you get it in soon, but we will go ahead and get started. So our first is from David, and he asks, isn't the ARC a bit late for beta testing a book?
Yes, I think so, in my opinion. I would agree with you, David, but I think every writer should do what's right for them.
Okay, we have Chelsea up next, who first asks, where do you find good beta readers? And I know you just addressed that kind of towards the end, but if you wanted to add anything else here.
Of course. So Chelsea, when I started, I would, as I said, literally take anybody off the street to beta read for me. And it was only after working with beta readers that first time that I kind of understood what a good beta reader is. And to me, a good beta reader is somebody who will give frank and honest feedback. So I think you would maximize your chances of that by being upfront and just saying to them, hit me with it. So ask your family, ask your friends, ask your fellow writers, maybe go to a Facebook group for readers in your genre and ask them if any of them would beta read for you. And just tell them that you really want an honest opinion. You don't want them to candy coat it for you. I hope that helps.
Chelsea also asks, has any beta reader ever stolen any of your works?
No, they haven't. And personally, I suppose I've been lucky. I've occasionally seen that my books have been pirated. I tend to think if somebody pirates my books and downloads from a pirate site, they're not going to pay for them anyway. So I don't regard it as a lost sale. And I'm lucky in that my beta readers have always been nice people. I suppose, to be quite a trusting person anyway. And luckily, that trust hasn't been misplaced.
Okay, over in the Facebook group, we have Linda who asks, she would like some more information on protocols. She said, when I asked where to find protocols, someone responded with books and classes. Well, after 10 plus years doing both, I have never seen a protocol list or heard it mentioned. Could you please elaborate on this?
I'm not sure what a protocol list is. Apologies for that.
Okay, no problem. Back in the Q&A, David asks, are your beta readers volunteers or paid or a mix of both? How do you set and enforce deadlines on beta readers?
Good question, David, or two good questions. First of all, my beta readers are not paid, but if you do wish to pay your beta readers, you can. There's nothing stopping you. Most beta readers will read for free, or they will beta read on the expectation that they will get a copy of the book when it's published, which is almost free. And in terms of deadlines, I tend to give a reasonably tight deadline, and 2 to 3 weeks, but in my head it's a kind of 4-week deadline, so I will chase towards the end of the 2 to 3 week period, and then if I don't get anything within a week after that, I will just accept that I'm not going to get feedback from that beta reader, and that's it. You cannot force volunteers to work to your schedule, but what you can do is use sufficient beta readers that it won't matter if 1 or 2 of them don't meet your deadlines and you can't use them. I really hope that helps.
We have in the Facebook group, Linda has elaborated, she was meaning finding someone who knows the protocols for the genre that you're writing in. So that's what she meant by.
Oh, right. Right. I apologize, Linda. Thanks for clarifying that. Basically, you need to find people who read in the genre, and then they will understand the tropes of that genre. If you're in any doubt, just ask them the question. Just say, are you aware of the common tropes in the genre? And you could perhaps list them out even, if you want to be absolutely sure, if you want to give them some kind of briefing. What you're really interested in is somebody who reads in that genre or writes in it already.
Okay, we have Sarah who asks, do you have any advice on how to be a good beta reader for someone else?
Ask them what they're looking for. When I beta read for other people, I do ask, is there anything that you'd like me to focus on? The vast majority of writers who give me manuscripts to beta read don't give me a questionnaire or any pointers at all. And that's fine, because then I'll just go through it. And if I feel that there are any plot holes or anything structural that doesn't really work, I'll tell them as politely as possible. And I'll also mark up a manuscript for typos. But I do ask, is there anything that you really want from me? What are you looking for from this? I hope that helps.
Okay, Daryl asks, do you use the same beta readers over all of your work?
Yes, I do. I have some beta readers who have been with me since book 1. What I tend to do is look through the feedback that I've had on a book and kind of work out where it was particularly helpful. If some of the beta readers just say, I loved it, it's wonderful, I do not ask them to beta read again unless they've got specialist knowledge that I happen to need. And at this stage, I can handle it if somebody tells me they hated the book. All I want to know then is why they hated it or what I can do about it. And if it turns out that they hated it for a reason that nobody else has mentioned, then I just ignore what they say, shrug and move on. But generally, I find if somebody doesn't like a particular aspect of my book, the other beta readers won't like that either. And that's a signal to me to go and rewrite and address that problem.
Okay, next we have a question from Chelsea. She says, I've had 3 rounds of beta readers over the course of 2 years, 15 beta readers in total. Only 3 actually finished my book and provided feedback. Does my book suck, or am I looking in the wrong place?
I suspect you're looking in the wrong place. Ask around and see if you can find some different beta readers. I can't believe that your book sucks. Get some new beta readers, Chelsea.
Marcy says, excellent presentation. Do you offer up any light training or resources to access so that the beta reader is savvy on what to look for?
I'm really sorry, I don't have anything like that available. Obviously, I give a beta reader a questionnaire, and that usually helps to direct their efforts. As Michelle mentioned, this presentation will be available, the slides will be available later, so feel free to copy the questionnaire and adapt it to your needs.
Margaret asks, how many beta readers should I have?
Oh, that's a really good question. It's a loaded question as well, because I have absolutely loads, but I do accept that looking at all their feedback and working out what to do with it does take time. So when I surveyed people, you'll see that the vast majority of the respondents had under 10 beta readers. So if in doubt, prioritize quantity over quality, find the people that you know will give you the kind of feedback you're looking for, and just ask a few of them to do it.
Weldon asks, should you use beta readers outside your genre? If so, why?
I do use beta readers outside my genre. It's up to you, and it's up to each individual writer, Weldon, as to whether you use beta readers outside your genre or not. I do, because although the beta readers who know my genre well will give me genre specific feedback, others may well have a particular knowledge that's useful. For example, in Lies at Her Door, one of the characters is a philosophy professor. Now, I'm lucky enough to have a son who is a philosopher, and normally he reads sci-fi and fantasy, but he did read Lies at Her Door a couple of times during the draft process, and it gave me some very, very good feedback on how my philosophy professor character would react to certain situations. So yes, to get specialist knowledge, I would use people who normally read books that are not in my genre.
Our next user asks, how do you deal with friends and family who personally ask you to send them your book and then they never read it?
That's too bad. You know, you can't force people to read it. You can't force beta readers to finish doing their beta reading. Occasionally, I have to deal with beta readers who never bother to read the book and who are a bit late doing so and miss the deadline. And, you know, they're volunteers, they're being kind to me. If life gets in the way, I think it would be churlish of me to complain about that.
We have an anonymous attendee who asks, do you show your work to a beta reader when you are done each chapter or after your first edit?
And I would normally do it when I've got the book as good as I can. So I would do it when it's finished. But I do know of other writers who do work with beta readers chapter by chapter. And it's quite common for writers to do a bit of a swap and to swap chapters with each other as they are writing a book. I don't do that because as I go along, I may well rewrite earlier chapters in response to the way characters are behaving in a later chapter. When I'm working on a book, I'm going on a journey with my characters and I'm learning about them as I write, even though I've planned the chapter and have a character Bible all planned out in advance. And so it's easier for me to give the final finished draft to beta readers when I've got it as good as I can. And then when I get their feedback, they will tell me all the many things I've got wrong and I will do some rewriting before it goes to my long-suffering editor. I hope that wasn't too much information. I apologize. I'm aware that that was rather a long answer.
Well, actually, to build off of that, Susie asks, what sort of editor do you pay? Is this before it goes to your agent and before it goes to your publisher, who will all want to edit it as well?
That's a good question. I'm an indie author, so I publish my books myself. Having said that, if I were to submit a book to an agent or a publisher, I would want it to be as good as it possibly could be before it went. And I would pay for an edit, because I think every book benefits from an edit. And, you know, if you have an agent or a publisher already, it's absolutely fine not to get your manuscript edited before you send it to them. But if you don't have one, if you're looking for one, put your best foot forward and get your manuscript as good as it can be by getting other people to help you first.
Kat asks, if you pay a beta reader, what is a reasonable pay?
That is a good question. And really, how long is a piece of string? I think Books Go Social is probably a reasonable guide, and I think they charge around the $100 mark. But if you want to know for sure, if you just Google Books Go Social, I think it's quite easy to find their website and find their rates. And that would be a reasonable yardstick to use.
Kat also asks, will you take their advice when they want to change a lot of your story? What if they don't like your book at all?
If they don't like my book at all, that's just too bad. You know, it's just not their kind of book. When I first started writing, I got a little bit upset. Okay, I'll be honest about this. I got tremendously upset when I got negative feedback of any kind about my book. And I would read all this feedback and be really, really upset for about 24 hours. And then I'd take a deep breath. I'd remember how helpful people were being, and I would start working out how to rewrite the manuscript to make it better. And by now, I've got a pretty hard skin. And if somebody says they just don't like it, well, shrug, too bad. I've got lots of books out there in the world. They've got loads of 4- and 5-star reviews. I've got enough external validation to know that one person's opinion, one person's negative opinion, is only that one person's opinion. It doesn't worry me.
We have an anonymous attendee who asks, what is your opinion on the difference between alpha reader, beta reader, ARC, and sensory reader?
That's a really good question. I think it comes down to definitions. So maybe what I consider a beta reader is what others would consider an alpha reader. So the first pair of eyes on a manuscript once the writer has produced something. But personally, I tend to lump all of my beta readers together. I would get the manuscript as good as possible and send it out to people who would then look at it and give me feedback before I get to an editor stage. And as I mentioned earlier, some people say that ARC readers who read what is pretty much the final book just pre-publication are the same thing as beta readers. But I don't think so. For me, a beta reader is somebody who reads the book at quite an early stage, when it's still in a state of flux and there's still a lot of rewriting going on. And finally, when it comes to a sensory reader, I totally understand that it can be a good idea to get a sensitivity reader to look at sensitive topics in a manuscript. I haven't had to necessarily do that, or if I have, I've had beta readers who had that kind of knowledge. Although my last book, or sorry, my current book, Lies at Her Door, doesn't have any particular sensitive issues in it. The book before that did have, and some of my beta readers had personal knowledge of those situations and were able to give me some pointers as to how I should deal with them in the book. So I'm sorry, again, I've probably spoken for far too long on this question, but the bottom line is there's a place for all of those people in the editing process.
To build off of that, the same user asks, do you then thank these individuals in your book, like in the dedication?
Yes, I do, but I get their permission in advance because not everybody wants to be named in the thank yous. But if people are happy to be named, then I do like to name them. So I will separately give a credit to the editor, the proofreader, and the cover designer. And then I have a paragraph of thanks where I thank everybody who has helped me in some capacity with the book, if they're happy to be named.
As we continue to answer questions, we have a user who would really like to go back to the slide for questions 16 through 22. Would you be able to hit the back arrow?
I certainly can.
Thank you so much. All right, there you go. Okay, what would be the benefits of beta versus critique group? Melina asks.
Presumably, Melina, you mean for a critique group, a group of people who will give you feedback in an open forum, so everybody's all together. The writing group that I belong to works like that, but we only have limited time, so I may only bring a chapter at a time to my writing group to get a joint critique from people at the same time. And as I mentioned earlier, I send beta readers the full book so that they can get the full reading experience. And I think that that's the difference. A beta reader can look at the book in the round, they can take as long as they like over it, and it's done privately. So I think that there is scope for using both beta readers and a critique group. I hope that's answered the question, but feel free to say if you meant something different.
Frank asks, have you ever used your Amazon reviewers as beta readers?
Some of my beta readers have gone on to review on Amazon, and that's of their own volition. But I haven't tracked down Amazon reviewers and asked them to beta read. No. Interesting. I don't know how I'd find them, to be perfectly honest. I mean, when you get an Amazon reviewer, they very often have a handle like Mr. New York or whatever, and how do you know who they are?
That's a good point. Zoe asks, do you recommend finding beta readers before you have a completed draft?
And personally, I don't do that, but other writers do. And I think it's totally what works for you, Zoe. Totally what works for you. Whatever helps you the most.
An anonymous attendee asks, is there a risk that beta readers could steal an unpublished manuscript, and how do you protect against that?
I guess there is a risk that they could. And I think somebody asked a similar question earlier. I take it on trust. You know, at the end of the day, I can't stop them doing that. But luckily, it's never happened. Most of the beta readers are people that I know personally. I have found beta readers through contact, so through friends of friends, and generally I trust them. I found beta readers from my newsletter list. I'm assuming that if they subscribe to my newsletter, they're kind of interested in my work rather than just sneaking around in the background and hoping one day possibly to be asked to beta read so that they can steal a manuscript. So I think I'm sorry, it comes down to trust. I tend to trust people, and so far that's worked out just fine.
Chris asks, do you have any input from beta readers for book covers for your new book?
Sometimes, because I have in the past put together a book cover myself so that I had a cover for the paperback that I give to the beta readers who like a paperback. And usually the covers that I put together are totally pants. I mean, they're terrible. And in the past, in my beta reader questionnaire, I would show them the cover and say, what do you think of this cover then? Can you think of a better idea? And without exception, they thought the covers were terrible. And of course, they had some good ideas. But the bottom line is, it's far, far better to use a professional cover designer than to try to do it yourself. It's far, far better to use a professional cover designer than even to get a nice beta reader to make your cover for you. So I don't ask them about covers anymore, and I go to one of the professionals to get mine.
Carrie asks, do you ask the beta readers to sign a non-disclosure document or an NDA?
Oh, what a good idea. No, I don't. But if I were nervous and twitchy about it, I would. So I think that's a fair point. To those who are worried about intellectual property theft, take that non-disclosure idea on board. Good one. Thank you.
Chelsea asks, if a beta reader never gets back to you, as in never finishes the book or sends in their feedback, do you reach out to them or do you just move on? And what would you say to them or ask them?
If they don't come back to me by the deadline, then I send them a chaser. I must admit there have been a couple of times when I've just forgotten because I've been too busy, but I have so many beta readers that it really doesn't matter if one or two don't reply, because I tend to get very good mood music from the others. I generally tend to know from the feedback if there's a particular structural point that I need to address. If I met a beta reader who hadn't replied, I wouldn't say anything about it. I just assumed that life got in the way. I might possibly ask if they were okay, but I certainly wouldn't hold it against them, because at the end of the day, they're doing me a favor. And if they don't have time to do me a favor, that's fair enough. I can't expect them to do anything. I'm just grateful for whatever they are able to do.
Our next user asks, do you speak to your beta readers one-on-one, or have you ever met with more than one in the same meeting?
Oh, that's interesting. I do speak with them one-on-one, but how interesting. It might be quite fun to have a joint meeting and have everyone discuss the book together. Yeah, that's quite an interesting idea, because you could do it on Zoom, couldn't you? You wouldn't necessarily have to hire a pub or something to cram them all in. Thank you.
Yeah, you could definitely use Zoom for that. I think we have time for one more question. Dawn asks, how do you deal with a beta reader who feels the need to totally and thoroughly edit the book?
As I said before, if somebody has a really good idea, or if they have multiple really good ideas, even if nobody else says the same thing and I think it's good, I'll take it on board. And if I don't think it's a good idea and nobody else has said it, then I'll ignore it. Simple as that.
All right, we've gotten through a lot of questions. However, Helen has agreed to come into the Facebook group after this to answer more. So if your question did not get answered, I look for the post with her AA Abbott tagged, and then you can put your question right in the comments and she will get back to you as soon as she can. But thank you so much, Helen, for coming today. This was great. I'm just going to drop those links in the chat one more time. Make sure you check out her social media and the details on her upcoming book release. It's coming up so soon. I'm sure you're very excited and have a lot going on. So we're so grateful that you had time to come and speak with us today.
Thank you, Michelle. I'm very grateful to ProWritingAid for your software and for your fantastic Crime Writers Week. And I shall be enjoying some of the subsequent sessions this week. And thanks to everybody for your questions too. That was really, really interesting. Good luck with your writing.
All right, everyone. Hopefully Zoom does not give us any more issues today. And hopefully we are able to get this replay up very quickly for you, and the slides will be on the hub as well. So we'll see you again for our next session, and we'll see you over in the Facebook group. Bye, everyone.